Alright, it's time for you all to hate me in the comment section below, because today we're doing a tier list on patch 11.1.5 based on all the DPS specs in the game. Remember, this is based off players playing the specs at a very high level for both Mythic Plus and rating, and we're going to be ranking them from best to worst. Don't forget, every spec in the game can complete all forms of content. This is just to show you the rankings as of right now. Okay, the wait is over, ladies and gentlemen. The first official merch drop from the Comeback Kids is here. We've got two classics, our clean and bold Comeback Kids logos, but we also got the real deal. Our very first limited edition exclusive one-time drop, the Retro Goblin Comeback Kids design. And once this shirt is gone, it's gone for good. Don't wait too long because we don't want you missing out. Hit the link in the description below to head on over to the site and grab your merch to rep the Comeback Kids in style today. And what better way to start off the tier list than with Unholy Death Knight? I mean, listen guys, Unholy has had a lot of great things going for it right now. The shocking thing is that heading into the new season, Unholy really didn't get that much changes. They just simply got a tier set that greatly increases the damage of Death Coil and Epidemic, and the meta became actually the Sand Lane hero talent tree, where now Unholy Death Knight is dealing some of the highest consistent burst damage I have ever seen, hitting in some pulls up to 30 to 40 million DPS at a time. This is primarily due to their uncapped AoE, their very easy dot spreading capability, and the fact that they have a chance to summon that Blood Beast that explodes for just unspeakable damage. Not only that, they bring great utility with Death Grips, Abomination Limb, and they're very tanky with all the defensives and Death Strike. Overall, Unholy is dominating right now, and there's no way you don't bring them up in the S tier. Next up, we do have the Balanced Druid. Now, I know you might hate me for bringing this one up, but Balanced Druid has some of the highest AoE damage potential in the entire game, while also having some fantastic utility to tie with it. Mark of the Wild is arguably one of the strongest raid buffs in the game. They have a Battle Res, Solar Beam, which if used properly, is incredible for an AoE silence. They have a pretty solid toolkit overall. Additionally, Balance has been getting buffed when it comes to the single target department over the last couple patches, so Blizzard has noticed that their single target is lacking, and they're now improving it. The one major weakness of Balanced Druid, I will say, is their survivability is pretty damn lackluster, and if you really want to get the best use out of it, it requires you to go in bear form for a few seconds, which in my opinion is an awful design. Overall though, Balance has definitely been in worse spots, but right now, their damage is insane in AoE, and it's greatly improved in single target drastically. Next up on the list, we have Arcane Mage. Now listen, I'm going to keep this one short and sweet. They've been performing awful at the start of Season 2, easily being one of the worst DPS specs in the game. Since then, Blizzard has done a couple damage increase passovers for the spec overall, boosting all of its damage by something like 12%, which is absolutely nuts. I think Arcane's design, it's not terrible, but the problem is they have zero build variety. Whether you're raiding or doing Mythic Plus, you literally use the same build over and over, which I think limits the spec overall and kind of makes it boring after a while. With these damage buffs though, Arcane has shot up to one of the best DPS specs in the game, while also being the third highest DPS in performance for Mythic Plus since all of these changes, which is really insane to see. We all know mages bring incredible utility and defensive capabilities to stay alive in Mythic Plus, so seeing Arcane deal really good damage at the moment gives them all they need to be a meta spec. Okay, moving on next, we have our A+ tier, starting it off with the Fire Mage. Listen, I don't think Fire Mage is in a bad spot. Just because Arcane is now performing better, Fire Mage just relies so heavily on a great group because without Combustion, they deal very little damage, and in order to get the greatest use of Combustion, they need to pull like 10 to 15 mobs at a time. So solo pugging with Fire Mage, it's a struggle, man, and if you're with players that might not be too experienced, it can really drag the performance of Fire down. I think Fire Mage is fantastic damage-wise, it's just not as consistent anymore as Arcane, and it relies too heavily on players and proper use of Combustion. Like we said before, Mage brings amazing defensives though, and great utility, so overall, Fire Mage is still in a very good spot. Now, a spec that took a major leap was actually Devastation Evoker. Now, all of Season 1 and very early this season, Devastation, they were struggling, but they got some adjustments to their tier set, the minor class changes to their hero talent trees and stuff, and by God, man, Devastation deals some inexplainable damage in the opener of fights. They particularly shine in a raiding environment when they're not, shafted by having target caps, because they can still play Scale Commander and they're shooting out those AoE disintegrates. Everything's lining up really well. The spec pairs also very well with classes like Death Knight and Fire Mage, to where everything gets clumped up and they can just nuke everything down in a matter of seconds. Not only that, Devastation does bring some good utility. They bring Cauterizing Flame, Rescue, other group-wide buffs and damage reductions, as well as having an incredible defensive toolkit with Obsidian Scales and Renewing Blaze. Overall, really like Devastation, and they are dominating right now, easily among some of the best DPS in the game. Next up, we do have the Affliction Warlock. Now, honestly, Affliction's in a pretty great spot right now. Hellcaller is the better hero talent tree at the moment, and with your permanent Wither talent being a thing for Affliction, it never falls off. So they deal some fantastic damage in raids when the mobs have higher health in Mythic, and you're just spreading those withers around. You're dealing really good damage with this cleave. Not only that, they just got buffed on damage with their Agony, Soul Rot, and Vile Taint, which definitely helps in Mythic Plus. And to put it simply, the more targets you pull with Affliction, the better they perform. So it does rely on you having a group that's really solid in Mythic Plus to mass pull. Other than that, they have some of the best defensives in the game. They bring Hellstones, pretty good CC with Shadow Fury, and Affliction's damage in combination with their defensives. It's a nice 1-2 punch combo, and it's a really solid DPS spec right now. Next up, we have the Elemental Shaman. Listen, I'm a big sucker for Elemental because they bring some of the most utility for your group in the game. They bring a raid buff, great dispels with their totems, AoE stuns, the shortest cooldown kick in the game, knockups with Thunderstorm, you name it, they have it. Not only that, Elemental has been getting buffed in the single target department with Farseer, so there have been some improvements for raid also. The best part about Elemental, though, I would say is simply just the AoE damage they're providing right now is just really solid. You're playing that Tempest Lightning Shaman build, you're using that Ascendance off the 3-minute cooldown, and you're just dealing insane numbers when you're inside of Ascendance, and it's easily some of the most fun you can have in WoW. Outside of Ascendance, I think things get a tiny bit stale, in my opinion. You know, you're spamming Chain Lightning, the occasional Elemental Blast, and then you're just spamming your Earthquake over and over. But Elemental Shaman is just above average for sure in every department in the game, of course, making them now a great DPS spec. Moving on next, we have the Destruction Warlock. Now, right off the bat, you gotta know Destruction Warlock has one of the best, if not the best, non-capped AoE damage potentials in the game. I personally have hit over 20 million DPS at the start of Cinderbrew, where I just literally melt everything in the room in a matter of seconds. You use that in Cataclysm, everything gets afflicted with Wither, you pop Malevolence, and then you just spam Rain of Fire, and everything just dies, and it's very, very satisfying. Not only that, their rotation is very fun, and it's simple, and their damage is very high in cleave scenarios due to Havoc duplicating that single target spell effects on multiple targets. So Warlock feels really good. They bring Hellstones, good CC with Shadow Fury, and some of the best defenses in the game. So overall, Destruction is in a fantastic spot right now. Next up, we do have the Enhancement Shaman. Now, it is true they aren't as good as they were in Season 1, but they are still very powerful. Right now, everyone's playing the Totemic Hero talent tree to deal some ridiculous uncapped AoE, and it's super easy to use, which is fantastic if you're a new player. To keep it very simple, the reason why Enhancement's so good, they deal solid AoE damage, they have very consistent single target, and they have some of the best utility in the game. They have the knockup with Thunderstorm, lowest cooldown kick with Wind Shear, and AoE stun with Surging Totem, AoE dispels for their group. Enhancement Shaman just, they're so great at filling that gap for your group, where if you need some utility, they can pretty much handle it entirely on their own for their party. Love Enhancement Shaman right now, a very fantastic DPS spec. Moving into the A tier now, first up we have Marksmanship Hunter. Marksmanship, I would say, is comfortably a solid A tier DPS spec. You have strong burst damage, very nice mobility, and it excels with massive cooldown driven hits and sort of pairing it with that 1-2 punch of aim shot and rapid fire that can pretty much dominate priority target fights, which is great for Mythic Plus. I will say Marksmanship does lack utility severely and survivability, but a skilled player who manages to use cooldowns properly with good movement can do some devastating damage windows, especially during True Shot. They did just receive a rework and some additional buffs to Sentinel and Dark Ranger, so I mean Marksman remains a pretty lethal and rewarding choice for players who want that high mobility sniper style ranged DPS. Coming up next, we do have the Feral Druid, and I'll be the first one to say that Feral Druid surprised me with their damage this season because they do some excellent DPS in Season 2. It's probably the first time in a long time where the choice between Balance and Feral in your group is not so clean cut and dry anymore. Feral has received a good amount of buffs heading into the season, and their tier set greatly amplifies their damage over time effects like Primal Wrath, Rip, Rake, and all these other effects, which feels great for Feral right now rotationally. Of course, we know Druid brings good utility. They got the Battle Res, arguably, you know, the best party buff in the game with Mark of the Wild, but defensively, Feral Druid is pretty damn lackluster. Feral probably has the worst defensive capabilities out of any melee DPS in the game, but if you can keep yourself alive and continue dealing damage, you'd be surprised this spec absolutely pumps and making them a pretty damn good DPS spec this season. Next up, we do have the Assassination Rogue. Now, I want to make this very clear right off the bat. Assassination Rogue's design, I think, is very solid. Their tier set is definitely not an improvement from Season 1, but is good enough to get the job done also. You go in there, you spread your garrotes, all your ruptures coming out of stealth to make it all AoE, you get your caustic splatter debuff up, and you're just tossing out millions of damage AoE to everyone around you. And then you get those juicy envenoms with your Deathstalker's Mark proc, and it's a surprising amount of fun. One thing about Assassination is that its build variety is kind of clear-cut and dry. You have like max like 2 builds possibly, but I don't think Rogue in general can offer, you know, as much as the other classes in the game in terms of utility. So I do think Rogue as a whole does get brought down substantially by this because they're a pretty selfish class. Overall though, in terms of pure DPS, rotation, and design, Assassination, in my opinion, is amongst some of the best in the game out there. Now, we do have to talk about Demonology Lock, and overall, I will say Demo is in a really good spot right now. What's shooting them high up on this tier list is definitely the fact that their tier set is so damn strong, which equates out to like one of the best tier set bonuses in the game, by the way. Not only that, their entire rotation is pretty easy, so it's not that confusing of a spec to get down once you understand like the basics of it and the timing of having all your pets out. You have great survivability, and overall, it's a pet class that's really fun to play. I do think Demonology struggles a lot if enemies aren't tightly grouped together, since all of their pets deal like AoE damage around a target, so there are certain times in raids where you don't get the full value of this spec. But overall, though, I'm loving Demonology. It's one of my main specs that I play, and it absolutely shreds in Mythic Plus right now. Next up, of course, you guys knew it was coming. We got to talk about the Retribution Paladin, man. Ret has one of the biggest benefits that it's probably one of the easiest specs to play in the game. It also brings some of the most utility for a group also. You have Lay on Hands, Off Heals with Word of Glory, Bubbles, Blessing of Sacrifice, good ground control, Interrupt, CC. So from a utility standpoint, they're amongst some of the best in the game, like Shaman. Not only that, every 30 seconds, they have massive damage windows combining Wake of Ashes with Avenging Wrath, so you can tie all of this together with your hero talent trees in tandem, and it works really well. So overall, Retribution Paladin's very simple, great utility, has an incredibly consistent damage profile, and it's a straightforward class that's fun to play, man. I love Retribution Paladin right now. They're in a great spot. Moving on next, we do have the Shadow Priest, where individually Shadow is pretty powerful. You just run into the issue that Discipline Priest is by far, you know, the best healer in the game right now, so it lowers Shadow's value. I do really like the build variety that Shadow brings. I love the utility with Power Infusion, love Power Word Fortitude as a buff, Mass Dispel, Mind Soothe, it's all really good things, and it's kind of packaged in a damage profile that is surprisingly really good right now. I would say the worst thing about them is their crowd control, though. They really only have Psychic Scream and then a 45-second, you know, singular silence on one enemy, and it's really tough to pitch that when you're trying to get into a group if there's already a Discipline Priest, so it is a struggle at that point. But I have seen some Shadow Priests pop off inside of dungeons, averaging like 3.5-4 million DPS, so the potential is absolutely there. Next up, we do have the Havoc Demon Hunter. Honestly, I would say overall, Havoc feels good right now. There is an argument to be made that both hero talent trees are strong and viable in respective to their content types that you prefer, whether it be Raid or Mythic Plus, and it's a very mobile spec that has some insane burst potential. I really like that Havoc has a nice gameplay curve that's not the easiest to play at the moment, so it's very rewarding if you properly get your rotation down. Not only that, Havoc Demon Hunter has a ton of leech, so they can heal themselves consistently, and they bring that 3% magic damage debuff with Chaos Brand, and they have a great class fantasy. So there is this issue right now of Vengeance Demon Hunter being one of the best tank specs in the game, so you don't want to have 2 Demon Hunters in your group, and that kind of brings them down. But either way, I think Havoc is in a really good spot right now, and I'm happy with them. Next up, we do have the Frost Death Knight, and to be honest, I was pretty surprised over the last few weeks on how their performance has greatly improved. It seems like the meta right now for Frost is shifting away from the Breath of Sindragosa build and going toward that chunky, you know, AoE obliterate and bursting those Razor Ice builds, and man, I'm going to be honest, they're performing substantially better the last few weeks. The reason they're an A tier is just comes down to the simple fact that they do solid damage and they have very nice CC with Death Grip, Blinding Sleet, Abomination Limb. You tie that with their offensive capabilities. Once again, I don't think they're as powerful as Unholy by any means, but Frost is definitely going to be very good continuing and moving forward to where they cannot be overlooked right now. In my opinion, Definitely one of the better DPS in the game. And next up, we do have to talk about Arms Warrior, because I'm going to be very straightforward here. Arms does some incredible damage overall, and it's probably one of the better specs in the game this season. They're currently playing with that Colossus and that nuclear demolish ability, and whether it be single target or AoE from Mythic Plus, man, they deal very, very high damage overall. The biggest problem that Warrior in general has is that it's an incredibly selfish class overall. You bring one buff, you don't really bring great control, you have the lowest utility in the entire game, and your self-healing is substantially low and amongst the worst overall. Don't get me wrong, I love Arms Warrior in the damage department. They're amongst the best in the game, but I personally like bringing specs with a little bit more utility, some more crowd control, and making sure the group doesn't die overall. Moving on to our next spec, we got to talk about Beast Mastery, and I'm going to be honest, it's in a substantially better place than they were in Season 1. All throughout the PTR for Season 2, they were dealing nuclear damage compared to everyone else. They did get some adjustments, and now they're sort of leveled out. Not only that, I think they have one of the higher performing single target specs in the game on specific fights in the raid, but their tier set is so solid for them right now, and it really elevates the class substantially. They also got some nice changes to where rotationally things feel much better than Season 1, and I would say the biggest thing holding this spec back is that they don't really have a lot of comps to build around them at all. I mean, they have pretty damn low utility compared to some of the best specs in the game, like Shaman or Mage. But overall, at an individual standpoint, they are doing some great damage-wise as a spec. And speaking of damage, we got to bring up the Subtlety Rogue. I think overall, Sub-Rogue has some of the highest burst potential in the entire game when you pair your major cooldowns like Shadow Dance, Symbols of Death, and Secret Tech together. You know, you pop all these three at once, and targets will just get destroyed around you, and it's very satisfying. The problem with Sub-Rogue, in my opinion, is that improper usage of all of these cooldowns can absolutely be the death of you, man. So if your group isn't pulling a good amount of mobs consistently, allowing you to pop your cooldowns at will at good timing, you're going to suffer very bad on Sub-Rogue, because one misplay, you can hinder your damage for like 30 to 45 seconds. And overall, I think the rotation's pretty fun. Their tier set bonus is really good for them this tier, and their hero talent tree gives them a lot of AoE damage with their Shadow Strike and Eviscerate. So I do think they're in a pretty good spot. Once again, when it comes to Rogue individually, though, as a class, they're a very selfish class. So just know that could affect the rate at which you get invites for Raid or Mythic Plus. But when it comes to damage, they're doing great individually. Next up, we do have the WindWalker Monk. Now, surprisingly, when it came to Season 2, WindWalker came out of the gate blasting. They were the #1 DPS overall for Raid, with a rotation that is incredibly fun with nuclear priority damage overall. So WindWalker has been fantastic lately. The big issue with this spec comes with the fact that they are heavily weakened as you start progressing through Mythic Plus, and you start to feel it when groups are trying to pull 10, 15 mobs at a time. You don't get me wrong, I think in the right hands, WindWalker is a phenomenal DPS spec, but that AoE cap starts to hinder them, and they rely on melee cleave groups pretty badly, like having an Arms Warrior, having an Enhancement Shaman, which they aren't that popular. I will say, I like the crowd control utility WindWalker brings. They bring that Detox, Ring of Peace for the knockups, Leg Sweep for the big AoE stuns. So all in all, it's a spec that I think is pretty damn good right now, and I think anyone would enjoy playing them. And now we're moving on to the B+ tier, and finally we have the last mage spec being Frost Mage. Now surprisingly, out of nowhere, even though Frost Mage is pretty damn good, it's actually now the worst mage DPS spec out of nowhere. With buffs to both Fire and Arcane happening the last few weeks, at this point, it's kind of tough to make the argument to get into a group. I think it has a solid damage profile for Mythic Plus in particular, while it does struggle very, very bad in raids. But because you're a mage, don't forget, you bring good utility, you have really good defensive capabilities, you have Mass Barrier, Ice Barrier, you know, Alter Time, Mirror Image, you always have cooldowns up to survive. I just think they're gonna struggle now with the fact that Arcane and Fire are substantially better. And speaking of better, we have next the Fury Warrior. Now, I know my buddy Max is going to hate me on this one, but I do think Fury Warrior has a very solid damage profile in a 4 to 6 target cleave scenario. Their damage is amongst some of the best in the game. Fury Warrior has nuclear AoE burst cooldowns and some great self-healing also. The downside of this spec is that their sustained damage outside of all these massive cooldowns is a bit lower than I would like, But by far the biggest issue I would say overall is that Fury Warrior has a pretty tough target cap. This doesn't allow Fury to truly excel in the way other specs should, especially with, you know, their counterpart being Arms Warrior when you're pulling massive amounts of enemies. Don't get me wrong, they're pretty well balanced AoE and single target damage wise, but the target cap compared to Arms, it's hitting them pretty damn hard, not even considering the fact that Warriors are very selfish in general, where they bring almost 0 to the party. Moving on next, we do have the Outlaw Rogue. This one pains me to say because I love the class fantasy of Outlaw. I love rolling the dice, the pirate theme, the flipping of the coins, and hoping RNG helps you out. But the truth of the matter is, rolling dice and flipping coins, it's not going to make your damage better. It's really, really shitty way to play the game when you're relying on RNG. And not only that, there's RNG when it comes down to whether you're getting your crack shot cooldown resets. Killing Spree is a disaster of a button to have to press every once in a while. And overall, the amount of buttons you're spamming over and over again, it's just not worth the headache when it comes to you lacking damage compared to some of the other specs in the game. I mean, you combine dealing less damage with the fact that you have a random RNG and then no utility for your group. Yeah, I would say it's going to be a pretty tough time overall. I personally hope they completely overhaul this spec because I think something needs to change. Now, I know some people are going to come from my head putting survival on the lower tier here, but the truth of the matter is that their performance inside Mythic Plus is pretty awful, man. Remember, this is a tier list based on both Mythic Plus and raiding, and I know survival's doing pretty well in raids right now. It's not even close enough to make up for the fact that they're one of the bottom Mythic Plus specs in the game. The problem is both Marksmanship and Beastmastery are outperforming them damage-wise, and that's probably the biggest reason why they're in the B tier. I don't think I've ever seen a Survival Hunter be meta as a Hunter spec individually, personally, and in my opinion, I think the class, you know, I think they need drastic changes moving forward, maybe in the new expansion or something, because I don't see this changing anytime soon. And lastly, we do have the class spec that is left in the dirt, and that is the Augmentation Evoker. Listen, Blizzard nerfed them substantially heading into new season, and it looks like it pretty much killed the spec entirely. They have been getting personal damage buffs over the last few weeks by like 20-ish%, but it's just not even close to bring them in line with some of the other better classes in the game. Don't get me wrong, I personally really enjoy playing Augmentation, and I love the class fantasy and theme, but Jesus, man, this class is getting its ass whooped right now across the board, whether it be for raiding or Mythic Plus, and it's just not looking good right now. I mean, how many Augmentation Evokers have you seen personally this season? I think there's a reason for that, and I'm hoping Blizzard addresses this sometime soon, whether it be with a full class rework or a complete overhaul heading into the new expansion. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is the full complete tier list on screen for you now. I know I'm going to have a lot of you disagree with me, and I think that's kind of encouraged with these type of videos. So if you think I'm an idiot, you think I'm wrong, let me know about it in the comment section below. I think there are a lot of really strong specs this season, and only a few specs that seem to be lagging behind everyone else. But overall, this season's got some really good balance, and it's pretty straightforward to, you know, see who the best and, you know, middle of the pack are compared to Season 1. Remember, this is based off Mythic Plus and rating. Just try to realize that every spec in the game can do any content in the game. This is just simply a list based off performance of some of the players who are pretty damn solid right now. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content and want to stay up to date on everything World of Warcraft, consider hitting that subscribe button and check out these videos here if you're really hungry for more. We also stream our live show every Wednesday night right here on YouTube and Twitch. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.